Many people assume that contract positions are super short. They also may think that they don't pay very much. That wasn't true. What I got was a 15-month job. It was a six-figure salary. It came with benefits. And I was able to convert to a full-time employee position at Microsoft. I actually got everything I wanted out of it.
If you're job searching right now, you're in the right place. Welcome to Land Your Next Job, the show that helps you move from ghosting and rejection to interviews and offers. I'm Erica Parker Price, a certified career coach with a background in tech who has spent nearly a decade helping professionals land roles at companies like Microsoft, Google, and mission-driven organizations. Each week, I share what's actually working in today's job market, from LinkedIn and networking to how AI is reshaping hiring. You'll get clear strategies and inspiration so you can run this marathon without burnout or guesswork. Follow the show and let's land your next job together.
Hello, everyone. I am Erica Parker Price, and this is Land Your Next Job. Today, I want to talk to you about a 1099 job versus a W-2 job. And when I say 1099 versus W-2, those are essentially the American tax terms for an independent contractor versus someone who is part of the permanent workforce. So whether you are familiar with those terms, whether you live in the US where I am or not, essentially what we're talking about here is a consulting or a contract job versus being a permanent FTE or full-time employee. Most people I talk to in the job search are looking for a permanent position, something where they would be part of the W-2 workforce. From a tax perspective, that means the company is responsible for withholding taxes, which doesn't happen when you're an independent contractor, but it really means more than that. It really means you are a part of the permanent workforce. Now, I question that term permanent because right now nothing feels permanent. And particularly for most of us here in the United States, where we have at-will employment, most of us can resign at any time we want, and most of us can be let go at any time that the company so chooses. I think there's a misnomer there, really, between thinking of 1099 work as temporary and W-2 work as permanent. It just isn't the way that it's happening right now in the marketplace. And I think that it makes an opportunity for a lot of people. I wanted to bring it up because it isn't something that most people consider. And I wanted to expose you to it in case it happens to be your next move, whether that means it's something that gets offered to you and I want you to have all the information while you're considering it, or it's something that you want to pursue. Maybe this is a parallel or alternate path to the search that you're currently looking at. And I'll start you out by saying that this is actually the way that I returned to Microsoft. For those of you that don't know, I was a boomerang Microsoft employee. It was my first job out of college. And then I went back when I was 50 years old, not the traditional time to go back to a career in tech. I had taken more than a decade off to raise my family, but I wanted to go back into tech. I specifically wanted to be at Microsoft. And I chose to go the route of being a 1099 contract employee. Now, when I say I chose it, that doesn't mean that I didn't apply to full-time jobs. I did apply to full-time permanent positions at the company. I did use my network to try and get one of those positions, and I just wasn't able to. So I decided that there was a different route and I was going to try it. The year was 2020, and it took me several weeks to land the job, but I bring that up here because several weeks is much shorter than the amount of time I had already spent trying to get back into tech, which was beyond a year at that point. I had taken a different role at a different type of company, different industry in the meantime, but I had spent more than a year looking for a job in the companies and industry that I was looking for unsuccessfully. So that's why I decided to pivot to it. I actually chose one very specific consulting firm that I knew placed people at Microsoft, and then I just pursued it very intentionally and very consistently. In a span of several weeks, I had a couple interviews and I was hired for a 15-month contract. Many people assume that contract positions are super short, that they're 90 days or something. They also may think that they don't pay very much. That wasn't true. What I got was a 15-month job. It was a six-figure salary. It came with benefits. And even before I ended that contract, I was able to convert to a W-2 job, a full-time employee position at Microsoft in an adjacent department. So for me, I actually got everything I wanted out of it. Now, that was 2020. I realized 2026 is a different market, but this is still definitely a viable option. Since that time, I have hired people as contractors, I have managed people, I have worked with clients that have gone back to work as contractors as well. So, what I wanted to do, first of all, was just break down some of those myths about it, and specifically myths that you're not going to get paid very much or you won't get benefits, etc. And I share that story because I want to continue to open the door for each of you to look at all the potential options that are out there. I also want to share why I think it might be even more viable right now. Two reasons in particular. Budget can be easier for companies to gain access to than headcount. Headcount is a long-term decision, and budget can just be for the quarter or for the year. And so when companies and departments have a specific problem that they need handled, they may not be willing to commit to a long-term strategy that says, yes, we want a forever person in this job. Of course, nobody's forever, but that's how companies tend to think of it when they're adding headcount. Budget can be easier. Let's just take $100,000 and allocate it to the problem for the next 90 days and bring in the people that we need. So that's the first reason, is that right now budget cash can actually be much easier to come by than having headcount allocated. The second reason is that companies are moving incredibly slowly right now. So anybody who is in the process of applying, interviewing, negotiating, any of those pieces will likely find that companies are moving really slowly. And when they're moving so slowly, getting signed on to work with a consulting firm or becoming a consultant can actually be a much faster process for you. And I'll talk a little bit later about what some of the different ways are that you can get into that. Before I do that, though, I want to share why I think this can be a good option for you. The first one we just talked about, the hiring process can be shorter. For me, I did one single 30-minute interview with the company, the hiring manager specifically, and I was hired. Now, I had been vetted by the consulting firm that I was working with in advance, so there was a little bit of that, but that applied to everything I was looking at for that several week period that I was. So it was just a shorter hiring process, and then just getting onboarded into the job was much shorter as well. The second is, I think it gives you a chance to check out a company. So many of us have these ideas that there's a certain company that we really want to work for. And of course, you can use your connections, your network to find out what is it really like to be on the inside. But there's nothing that does a better job of that than actually being on the inside. And of course, it goes without saying that you're going to grow your network while you are doing this. The next thing is, I think it really gives you a chance to build your skills. So the thing that naturally comes to mind right now is AI, because so many people are getting that question in their interviews. So many people are finding it showing up in job descriptions as something that a company wants as a skill set. And it's hard to have that if your previous company or previous role wasn't actively engaged in AI. So it can definitely be a way to build your skills, whether that's the skill set or not. And AI is just one example of that, of course. Next thing I would say is that the money can actually be better. So there are trade-offs that you make when you are taking a consulting position versus a full-time position. And one of the biggest ones is that nobody is there looking out for your career. There is no career development plan. Nobody is going to hold your hand. You are there to do a job, to do a specific project or a specific task or a specific role. But as part of that trade-off, many people find that they get paid more as a consultant than they do as part of the permanent workforce. Depending upon how you do this, and specifically if you go through a consulting firm, many of these jobs actually come with benefits. And so in my case, I think of it as a 1099 job, but I will tell you it actually was a W-2. The W-2 wasn't with Microsoft. It was with the consulting firm that I worked for. they actually did take out the taxes. But in addition to that, they gave me health insurance. I had sick leave, unlimited vacation, and they had 401k matching. So they matched my retirement savings plan to a certain extent. So the myth that you're foregoing all benefits isn't necessarily true in all cases. And then the final reason that I think it can be a good thing to consider is that it can extend your runway. So many of us have a certain period of time that we know we can go without income, or that we have, for example, severance or unemployment or something that will carry us over to that next position. What this can do if you haven't landed that dream position at the dream company is it can just extend your runway. It can give you more time to be looking there. It can give you more time to wait for the right opportunities to come up. I know many of you have your sights on a particular company, a particular job, and you're even talking to people on the inside that are saying, hey, hang on, we think we're going to be able to do it next quarter, next year. This might give you a way to be able to hold out for that. The next thing I want to talk about are what are the different ways that you can do this. The way that I talked about was to work for a specific consulting firm. I happened to go with a local boutique agency. And remember, this was early 2020. And so at the time, most work was in person. And it was actually something that was covered in my interview. There was mention that there was this weird work from home thing for a few weeks, but probably everybody would be back in the office soon. And I would be expected to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. I specifically went with a local firm because the company that I was looking to go to was local to where I am. Now, things have changed dramatically. Consulting roles are frequently remote. You may have a much better chance of landing a remote position in a consulting firm than you can with a company that already has a return to office mandate in place. One of the most common questions I get when I talk about this is how do I find who the firms are? So first of all, always use your connections. If there are companies that you want to go work for and you know people that are working there, ask what companies they use to hire contractors. Ask if they use contractors, if there are specific departments that do. But specifically what you want to get to is who are the companies that they are hiring from, because most companies will have a list of approved contractors that they work with, and that's what you want to be part of. If you don't know anybody, I have a website that I like to send people to. It's called oncontracting.com. I'll put it in the show notes. I always tell people it looks like a very old, outdated website, but it has good information on it. So give it a chance. You can put your location in, you can choose your company and your department, and it will tell you a list of which companies actually place people at the company you're looking for. So what you're looking for is who is the consulting firm that gets called when the company you want to go to has a need. That's where you want to get on with them. You want to build a relationship with that consulting firm so that when they get a request for somebody who has your skill set, you're the one they think of. Okay, so that's one option. The next one is to do your own thing. So really just think about, if I was going to consult, who would I consult for? Many of you at this point are probably thinking, I'm not a consultant, I don't have a business, I don't have an LLC. But what I'm saying is that you don't have to have all of those things. Now, of course, don't take my word for it on whether or not you need an LLC. You can go find all that out. I'm sure that some LLM will give you all the answers you need. But what I'm saying is that if you have a particular skill set, something that you have been doing at your previous company, maybe that's something that you can offer on a project or a consulting basis. And the best place to start is frequently your last company. Now, I will pause on that because some people may think, I did not exit well from that last company, and totally understand that. I absolutely have many clients who have gone back to consult for their former company, and they've left under a variety of circumstances, voluntarily, involuntarily, neat and tidy, messy, all of those things. And many of them have gone back to consult for their former company. So don't rule it out. Don't rule out companies that you worked for, maybe one or two companies ago. Maybe you have a particular set of knowledge that would be valuable to them. I think of my brother in this case. My brother's a pilot. He flies for JetBlue, but in a former lifetime, he was an aerospace engineer for Boeing. And there was a time, this actually just came to me, not even in my notes of what I'm supposed to be recording here, but there was a time that Boeing, who he had worked for previously, needed somebody with, quite frankly, I think ancient software experience. And he was somebody who had done that. So somebody reached out to him to see, rather than training new people on this old software they'd been using, would my brother be able to do that? So it just comes to mind as sometimes the experience you have, the wisdom you have, might actually be of value to companies that you worked for previously. Maybe it's a relationship you have with a particular customer, vendor, supplier, who knows? And then broaden it out. Who else could you consult for? If you take a look at the skill set that you have, and then you look amongst your professional and personal networks, is there anybody who needs the skills that you have? Those are just some ideas for consulting on your own. We could go much more in depth, but I want to keep going with some of the different options here. There are also companies big and small. So think of some of the large consulting firms like McKinsey, or smaller consulting firms that actually want to keep people essentially on retainer. Maybe that's not the right word for it, because usually there's zero payment if you're not actually doing the work. But this would be something that you may find in your industry, that there's a particular company that is willing to pay you. Maybe it's for 5 hours. Maybe it's for just like a 10-hour project, or maybe it's, hey, hop on the phone for an hour and talk to people about this thing. I would say ask around in your industry, see if people know of anything like that, but that can be an interesting one. And then finally, fractional work. So fractional work has been getting more popular, particularly for smaller companies and startup companies. So I don't know if it started here, but I think of it as starting kind of in the CFO space. So you're a small company, you need somebody to be doing your finance, but you're not large enough to actually have somebody full-time in that role. But I have seen many more fractional opportunities now, like fractional product managers, fractional marketing people. So that's really kind of in that startup space, but an opportunity for you to get hired on sharing the skills that you have with a company who needs them. Okay, so those are some different ideas for where you might actually find consulting opportunities, whether you are creating it on your own or you're finding a firm to work for. But what do you need to consider? I'm going to give you a list of questions to think about. The first one is, what do you most need now? So if you're listening to this podcast, you are thinking about landing your next job. And I want you to think about what's most important to you. Is it the money? Is it the benefits? Specifically, health insurance is the one I hear most about. Is it the skill building? Do you feel that there is a gap in your resume where you don't have the skills you need to land the job you want? Is it to strengthen your resume? Some people come to me with a resume that doesn't necessarily have any recognizable companies on them. Maybe you have been working for yourself. Maybe you've been working for small companies and you want to move to large, or you've been working in one industry and you want to move to a different one. And finally, maybe you're fine on all of those. Maybe you still have runway, the money's fine, you have benefits through your partner or Cobra or some other thing. But what you really need is just the opportunity to start using your brain again. You're looking for something that will give you more consistent feedback, a chance to interact with others, something that is more fulfilling than the job search, which most of us will agree is not the thing that we're going to for all of our fulfillment. The next question I want to ask you is, how does it advance your story? If you are going to take a consulting position, is it something that you're going to put on your resume, you're going to put on your LinkedIn, and does it advance your story forward? So if you're sitting in an interview and you're interviewing for your dream job and somebody says, oh, explain to me why you're doing this role at XYZ company, how does that fit into your story? Because you want to make sure that you are continuing to improve upon how you show up for that next permanent opportunity. And when I say that, I will also say that I know people who actually do consult long term. So I know people who have been in the consulting role for years and years, and it's intentional, and they're choosing not to work for the company that they tend to consult for. So that is absolutely a choice that some people make. You may ask why. Flexibility is one, right? You may be able to just take 3 months off. You may get to the end of the contract and decide you're going to take a little bit of time off. Like I said, sometimes it's better money. And then from a career perspective, many people feel that it's less politics because you're just hired to do one thing. You're not trying to advance. You're just in there to get in, get the job done, get out. Okay, and then finally, I want you to think before you move to anything like this is, will you continue the search? So maybe you'll decide that this is the next job that you want to land. Maybe you've been given a long enough contract that you're getting the money you need, you're learning the skills to continue to grow, and this is perfect. If that isn't the case, how will you continue that search? Are you going to take a little bit of time off and then restart it? How will you find the hours to do it? Because I don't want to minimize that going back to work in a consulting position, that is going to take away time. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing though, because we talk about all the time on this podcast how you can't job search 8 hours a day. Literally nobody does that in a sustainable way, right? You may have powered through those long days early on, but nobody holds on to that. So I do think you can still take a 1099, a temporary consulting role, or create one for yourself and still have time to do the job search. I don't think it's either or. I don't think of it as black and white. And then this last one, it's not really a question. It's just something to consider for anybody who has never worked in this space, particularly if you're here in the United States and it is a 1099. Just know that you got to get your ducks in a row when it comes to taxes because you will be responsible for those and you definitely don't want to figure that out at the end of the year. I hope this information has been helpful for you. Like I said, this was the way that I got back into the industry that I wanted to. I fully recognize that it was a different market back then than it is now, but I also see that there are absolutely still people getting those contract positions, and they're frequently landing them more quickly than the permanent roles that I see people getting. Whether this is an option for you or not, it's always good to have your eyes wide open as to what is going on out there in the market. And so thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Now take this information and go implement it in whatever way is best for you. Go have a great week. I am rooting for you.
That's a wrap for this week on Land Your Next Job. If this episode helped, please leave a quick review and subscribe wherever you listen. Share it with a friend in transition, and I'll see you next Monday. Let's land your next job together.